Friends, today is September 17th. It's my birthday, and I've received many wonderful gifts from the armed forces of Ukraine. They attacked the Morozovsk airfield with tactical aviation. Everything inside is already ablaze. Everything is burning there. Trainloads of military equipment have been blown up near St. Petersburg, and even a skyscraper in the center of Moscow is on fire. And now the homeless force of Ukraine is entering the Kursk region, as Russian war correspondents are reporting right now. And Ukrainian drones have bombed every sixth Russian oil refinery. Holy crap. So it's already an oil refinery, right?
Yes.
This is a special holiday broadcast with you and also with Dmytro Gordon. Dmitry Ilyich, I am very glad to see and hear you today.
Dasha, hello. I congratulate you on your birthday. Well, I didn't know that. You didn't warn me first.
And Dmitry Ilyich had such an experiment with us today.
Be happy. And may the armed forces of Ukraine bring you this happiness.
Yes, the greatest gift is Ukraine's victory. Friends, please leave a few warm words of support for Ukraine's armament in the comments of our tandem with Dmitry Ilyich. Every week we kick the Russians' asses, as they say. Dmitry Ilyich, let's start with something positive. So all these events, explosions in St. Petersburg, the attack on the oil refinery, the skyscraper burning in the center of Moscow, trains with military equipment, and the Morozovsk airfield. How do you assess the work of our armed forces?
I have nothing to add. By the way, we have amazing guys and girls. Many of them serve in the armed forces of Ukraine. We can be proud of both our armed forces and our special services. You know, this is a topic for a much more special and detailed conversation after the war, when a great deal more can be said openly and when so much more of the truth can be shown. This is because a significant amount of footage is being filmed that, for very obvious security reasons, cannot be shared with the public right now. But our immense pride in our defenders and their actions is something that will be known. In our guys and girls will only grow after the war, because they are true heroes.
Dmitry Ilyich, there was a very interesting piece of news this week, and I can't help but discuss it with you. It's about how a drone tried to attack the Polish government quarter, the residence of President Brodsky, at the very moment when he was on a foreign visit. And here's an interesting point. It turned out to be Belarusians, and most likely they launched the drone from the territory of Warsaw.
There was a Ukrainian and a Belarusian involved.
And even a Ukrainian, in fact. But how reliable is this information? Because at first the report said 2 Belarusians. And that's where my question comes in. Is this a provocation from Russia? And how serious is it? Because this is a precedent, Dmitry Ilyich, honestly.
Well, of course, it's a provocation from Russia. They're very skilled at this. You see, they recruit representatives from a variety of countries, including some that you would never even begin to suspect. Now, who was it that actually killed Porubi? The answer is, it was the Ukrainians. And so then, who else was involved? Who killed Hanola? Ukrainians. And who tried to assassinate Stenenko? Ukrainians. They operate in a sophisticated, cunning, and cynical way, so they can say it was the Ukrainians themselves. It's just infighting within Ukraine. No, this is the kind of work the FSB does. They are very experienced in this line of work. Ours aren't sleeping either.
Dmitry, what does it mean that we have 2 versions, 2 different ideas that I hear from your experts on the YouTube channel? For example, Gennady Gudkov is 200% certain that at this moment, Europe will not be able to stop Putin because NATO is a defensive alliance. NATO cannot be offensive. NATO is afraid of a nuclear state, and Putin will take advantage of this. And war in Europe is close. For instance, an attack on the Baltic countries, a hybrid attack, little green men, and so on. Iskandars are already stationed on the border with Poland, and Putin might take advantage of this because NATO does not respond. Other experts are 200% certain that Putin is bluffing, that he faces economic collapse, and that he will end the war soon. But Gennady Gudkov and many others believe the opposite, that Putin will continue to fight because war is his way of political survival. Dmitry, which of these 2 opinions do you lean towards?
War is Putin's method of political survival. Absolutely, I agree with that. For Putin, everything is actually quite simple. What is his goal? His goal is to stay in power in order to stay alive. In other words, for Putin, the main and only goal is to remain in power. To stay in power, he needs to keep fighting. Because the so-called achievements he has today cast doubt on his ability to stay in power. Let me explain why. All right, in Russia, they'll ban everyone from speaking. They've already banned it. Fine, they'll ban people from thinking. But even the most naive fool understands that there's a point, and he will inevitably ask a question. The question is this: all right, Banderites, Nazis, fascists who hate everything Russian, who threatened us with war, who were ready, together with NATO countries, to enter Russia in order to bring Russia to its knees. All of that is clear. And that's why our great geostrategist started the special military operation. All of that is clear. Why did the great geostrategist calculate everything in such a way that he didn't take Ukraine? Not in 3 days, not in a month, not in 2, not in 3. Why were they already near Kiev? They were already in Kiev and even entered Kharkiv. Why didn't they hold on to all of that, and why were they pushed back? Why has the war been going on for so many years? You know, World War II lasted, well, I recently calculated, not World War II as a whole, but the war on the territory of the Soviet Union and the Soviet Union's war with Germany, which was called the Great Patriotic War in the Soviet Union. It lasted from June 22nd, 1941, until, roughly speaking, May 1st, well, let's say May 9th, since that's when Victory Day was named, but until May 1st, 1945. So it lasted. So all in all, we're looking at a duration of about 3 years and 10 months. And now our war will soon have lasted 3 years and 10 months as well. So from the Russian side, where is the result? What is the result? That we couldn't subjugate Ukraine, couldn't conquer it. The truth is, in 3 years, we've lost 1 million soldiers, killed and wounded. And in all that time, we haven't actually conquered anything of significance. In fact, what we've taken is less than 1% of Ukrainian territory. So the question is inevitable. Uncle, this is a question for Putin. So what are you doing? You sacrificed 1 million people for 1% of Ukrainian territory? And where is your great gift of foresight? Where are you, great geopolitician? So did you really calculate everything? How many people have you sent to their graves? And now our economy is already falling apart. Well, there are big questions here. That's why, for Putin, stopping the war is equal to a catastrophe. That's why I believe he will keep fighting as long as the West and Ukraine don't stop him, whether economically, militarily, or in any other way. Until there are concrete actions to stop Putin, he will keep fighting, because there is no way back for him.
Dmitry, let's now discuss what we have. We now have an official statement from Trump that he will impose sanctions against Russia only when Europe does it, that is, completely refuse energy resources from the Russian Federation. But we perfectly understand that France, Slovakia, Hungary, Malta, Greece, and a number of other countries are still dependent on this. They continue to make purchases anyway, no matter how it happens. And are we right in understanding that this means Trump won't impose any sanctions on Russia in the coming months or years at all?
It looks that way. It looks that way. But we're being honest with each other here. Of course, especially since it's your birthday. That puts even more responsibility on me to tell it like it is. Happy birthday, Dasha. That's why I want to say that, in essence, Trump is right. In all fairness, he is right. I mean, you, Europe, are buying oil and gas from Putin for huge sums of money. More than you give to Ukraine. Do you have any conscience at all, Trump says. Isn't that logical? Isn't this conversation logical? Absolutely logical. Moreover, he's the president of the United States of America, right? Isn't he interested in the prosperity of his own country? Well, of course. That's why he tells them, why do you need Russian gas? Buy mine, liquefied gas. Buy mine, why do you need Russia? They say, but Russia is cheaper. He says, well, then just pay a little more. Moreover, Dasha, to buy everyone who buys Russian energy resources is a participant in a corruption scheme initiated by Russia. Russia hooks everyone who buys its gas and oil on huge sums of money, meaning it forces or invites them to engage in corruption together. Any head of our Naftogaz will tell you this. Anyone who has dealt with Russia, let's put it this way, from presidents to prime ministers, anyone will tell you that this is a corruption scheme in which many prominent people of our country have participated. And Comrade Orban, Comrade Fico, and so on continue to participate. Because damn it, this is real cash. The Russians don't hold back. The Russians say, come with us. We'll give it to you. Because the Russians don't have to report to their people about income, deductions, or anything at all. The people remain silent. This cash box is their personal property, the property of the Russian authorities. That's why they can take from there for themselves, give to others, and engage in corruption. Because it's better to sell oil and let everyone earn money than not to sell oil and have no one earn anything.
What is our way out of this situation? What should we do in such a situation?
Dasha, we have several options. First, ramp up the production of our own weapons. Second, use these weapons to strike Russia, forcing it to sink into economic darkness. We are hitting oil refineries very effectively. This has already led to a real shortage of gasoline and kilometer-long lines at gas stations in many regions. Is this a good thing? It's very good. Anything that creates internal political tension in Russia is good. What has Russia been doing throughout its entire history? It can't produce, it can't bring joy, it can't invent or create, but it can make a mess. It makes a mess very well, and for making a mess, it gets special privileges. Now we're going to make a mess for you. Calm down, I'll give you money. I'll give you... They behave like racketeers from the 1990s. Now we're going to burn down your restaurant. No, I'll pay. It's exactly the same thing. That is, a racketeer couldn't build something or start a business on his own. He could only threaten to do bad things if he didn't get paid. Just like that. For the fact that I won't mess things up for you. That's how Russia behaves. I've just found this image, and it's very accurate. They say, we're going to bomb you now, give us money, or do this and that. And people obediently say, okay, of course. Ukraine needs to adopt this approach. This is invaluable experience. And do nasty things to Russia. Here's something for your oil refinery. So how are you doing over there? Is it still okay for you? And here's more for you. Here's something for your railways, your infrastructure, for everything that, besides creating internal political tension, also naturally complicates the military logistics of the Russian army. But it's very important to create among Russians themselves a sense of war, because there's an unspoken agreement there. How does this work? Let's say I'm a Russian, God forbid, and I've got bread and sausage on the table, vodka. If there's no vodka, then there's moonshine. If there's no moonshine, there's hawthorn tincture. I can get completely drunk. I can eat bread and sausage. I can live. Seems like I have a place to stay. Everything's there. People with a bit more money, they also, well, the money keeps coming in. We can afford restaurants at Patriarch's Ponds in Moscow. We can afford oysters. In other words, just like there were oysters in restaurants before the special military operation, there are still oysters during it. They haven't gone anywhere. And in supermarkets, in stores, the full range of products is still available. I drove a Mercedes before the war, and I still drive a Mercedes now. So, basically, your war, Russians think people from different walks of life. It doesn't really concern us. You go ahead and fight your war over there. If you need to, go ahead and fight. The main thing is that it doesn't affect us, ordinary Russians, right? But it needs to affect them, every single one. So they understand that the war has come to them and is after them. They started to realize this when the mobilization happened in September 2022. That's when they began to understand, because before that, they were just living their lives without a care. Putin is dealing with the Ukrainians over there. That's their business. It doesn't concern us. And then they started taking their children for meat grinder assaults to be ground up. That's when they started to get nervous. Oh, Putin saw that and stopped. He immediately halted the mobilization. He thought, it's better than creating this kind of tension inside Russia. I've got money, I'll use my money to buy this meat at a high price. Rather than take it for free and create a problem that could end up costing me a lot more, I'd rather recruit them in small, targeted numbers. That's why Ukraine's task today is to create internal political tension within Russia so that Putin feels unstable because he's very afraid of his throne being shaken from within.
He is genuinely afraid that he could be overthrown, specifically of a coup d'etat.
He's afraid he could be overthrown, and he understands this. He's a KGB man, after all. He knows that the KGB's main task was always to prevent mass unrest. Because suppressing mass unrest is much harder than preventing it in the first place. In other words, prevention is always more important than suppression. The Soviet Union was shaken by major upheavals. There was, for example, the Novocherkassk massacre in 1962 under Khrushchev. The regime was very afraid at that time. There were protests in Tbilisi when the cult of personality around Stalin was denounced. Then listen, there were protests in Kazakhstan when Gorbachev appointed Kolbin from the Ulyanovsk Regional Committee to replace Kunaev, making Kolbin the first secretary of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of Kazakhstan. Kazakh youth took to the streets in protest. It was a dangerous situation. Nazarbayev was quickly appointed to replace Kolbin. And then there were also interethnic conflicts. The KGB is terribly afraid of this. And the main thing is not to let it happen. That's why Putin clamped down on everything inside so tightly to prevent any uprising so that not even a mouse would squeak. But if you force these crazies to squeak, they might. That's dangerous. So as long as everything is stable inside and there's food to eat, and they don't make any sacrifices on the altar of war as long as things are calm. As soon as the war starts to affect many people, there could be uncontrollable events. Various uncontrollable events. And as for the National Guard, we saw it ourselves. When the protest on Bolotnaya happened, the National Guard already wavered and they wouldn't have gone in. When a lot of people came out, the National Guard wouldn't have dispersed them anymore. Any questions?
Yes, it's just that no one is coming out yet. Dmitry Ilyich, look, right now, everyone is writing about the huge problems at Russian airports, like at Sheremetyevo, where planes are breaking down. Russians are forced to sit on planes for 5, 6, even 10 hours at a time. They're all furious. The railway hubs are also in chaos because we're blowing up trains carrying military equipment. There's a railway collapse. It's impossible to buy tickets. There are certain elements of panic, but so far it's not enough. So our task is to keep up constant drone attacks on Moscow, St. Petersburg, and these regions in order to...
I would even say St. Petersburg, well, St. Petersburg is important as a port. Yes. Ust-Luga, yes. Yes, in my opinion, an attack on Moscow is very important. Muscovites are living in such a state of complacency. The war doesn't affect them. The war is somewhere out there. By the way, this is a very interesting psychological point. I remember the Maidan, not the Orange Maidan. I took part in 2 Maidans, but specifically the Revolution of Dignity. Yes, on Khrushchevsky Street there was a clash going on, but just half a block away from Khrushchevsky, people were sitting in restaurants and cafes as if nothing was happening. Do you understand? And all of this is happening right there. It would seem so. In other words, it's a completely different life over there. In Moscow, life is not that of a wartime city, not the capital of a country at war, but it should be the life of the capital of a country at war, of a country waging an unjust war. That's why, in my opinion, all attacks should, of course, be directed at Moscow. Moscow, like Kyiv, should be under constant drone and missile attacks. And Muscovites should be asking questions not just to themselves, but to the government. What's going on? Why is this happening? Because all revolutions always happen in the capitals. And Moscow is no exception. Both coups and victories over coups. Everything happens there. That's why I would, of course, increase the pressure on Moscow. Now, people will say to me, but there are decent people in Moscow who are against Putin, against the war, and support Ukraine. Of course there are. Of course there are. But that's not who we're talking about right now.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Dmytro, I know that you're always going to tell me that this is big geopolitics, that the current situation is unrealistic, and that what NATO did was the right thing to do. I know you're going to say that, but I'm going to ask you the question anyway. This is solely my opinion. I believe that in the situation with the drone and missile attack on Poland, NATO demonstrated its absolute impotence. That's my opinion. And I think this will allow Putin to continue taking even more aggressive actions. But I'm interested in your opinion.
Yes, it's your birthday today. By the way, happy birthday to you. So how can I argue with you? Tell me, can I argue with you on your birthday?
Go ahead, let's argue. You can.
I agree with you. I agree with you. NATO has shown absolute impotence. That is 19, or according to some sources, 23 drones entered NATO territory. How is that even possible? And again, they remain silent. They're shooting down these cheap drones with missiles that cost millions of dollars.
Dmytro, did you know that the house in Poland where that explosion happened was actually hit by an F-16 missile?
I know.
I know.
And again, they're silent. Here's how I would act. 19 drones enter Poland, and then right away, 38 drones, twice as many, enter the Kaliningrad region. They don't bomb the Kaliningrad region, they just enter and circle around. They shoot them down, fine, let them shoot them down, but the fact is recorded. For our 19, they responded with 38. That's a different story. You're showing guts. But otherwise, it gives the impression that you have no guts, nothing to show. And if there's nothing to show, they'll keep screwing you over. That's the Russian principle. That's how they operate. They push a little. I've already talked about this. If it gives way, they keep pushing. They keep pushing until they meet resistance. Why let it get to that point? Just punch them in the face right away and everything will be fine.
Dmytro, can you assume that in this way Putin will go further? Because again, it's a disaster. Even American media are now writing that Trump has legitimized Putin and that Trump during his presidency legitimized Putin.
He almost even hermetically sealed Putin.
I wish Putin, together with Trump and Elon Musk, would fly to Mars. They don't have to come back, or even
to a Snickers bar.
Yes, good riddance, as they say. Back to the topic of Putin. Right now, Putin is attacking Ukraine much more. Terrorist attacks, unfortunately, that's the sad statistic. And others have written that perhaps it is precisely under Trump that Putin might try to attack a NATO country. Most likely, it would be the Baltic countries, and at that moment, Trump would be sitting in a restaurant with a steak, and when a journalist asks him about Russian troops attempting a coup on the territory of the Baltic states, for example, he might just say, yes, but that's probably some kind of mistake. And that's it.
I don't rule that out, Dasha, that Putin might go after the Baltic countries.
Right?
And the Baltic countries don't rule it out either. You know, it's actually quite interesting. A friend of mine was telling me that he has some relatives, some of his extended family, who are currently living over in the country of Poland.
Contained within
Warsaw. He says they've already left Warsaw for Germany. I asked, why? Because they're afraid of a Russian attack on Warsaw. I said, no, that's impossible. He said, but back in 2022, you said a full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine was impossible. I said, yes, I did say that. But you see, I said, the logic is ironclad. So I say anything is possible. Nothing can be ruled out. You have to consider every possibility. Could Putin, for example, attack the city of Narva? The Estonian city of Narva? Yes, easily. What's the logic? He'll say that Estonians are oppressing Russians. Russians are the majority in that city. They border Russia directly. He'll say they're humiliating Russians, not letting them speak Russian. They're imposing the Estonian language. We have to protect our compatriots. So what if it's a blockade? These are our people. Wherever the Russian language is spoken, those are our people. Could he attack Narva? He could with what? Now the question is, with tanks, he doesn't have many tanks left. That's all that's left. Thanks to the efforts of the Ukrainian forces. Could he attack with drones and missiles? Could he? He could. Could drones hover and bomb everything in Narva if he wanted to? Yes, of course, it's possible. He might not even bother using missiles. Cheap drones could fly, so to speak, to Narva. Because it seems to me that Narva, NATO is not ready to defend Narva, just like it wasn't ready to defend Poland. Because when you shoot down cheap pennyworth drones with extremely expensive multi-million-dollar missiles, that's not what you call readiness. If I were NATO, I would have long ago studied Ukraine's experience. If I were NATO, realizing that drones are the main threat today, I would have invented counter-drone measures 1,000 times over by now. They already exist. You launch a little gadget into the air and it finds and shoots down drones on its own. But where is the production? Where is the overproduction? Where is the heroic socialist labor for the common good? Is something else more important?
Yes. Dmitry, are you aware that Donny from the UK, together with his wife Milana, will soon, as we understand, have an audience with King Charles, and everyone is writing that Keir Starmer might be able to convince Trump without Tissank? Of course I don't believe it, but there's a very important point I wanted to ask you about. I know that Trump dreamed of being the first to meet King Charles after his second ascent to the throne of the United States. But of course, that's just a joke, and Zelensky actually beat him to it a little. And overall, I get the impression that Donald Trump is simply jealous of Zelensky's popularity, and that's working against our country. It seems to me that Trump is irritated by Zelensky, who is just as popular as Trump, or maybe even more so, and that's why this works against Ukraine. What do you think?
Dasha, there is definitely logic in what you're saying. It's your birthday today, congratulations, so you're being logical.
Dmitry from the UK never argues with me on any...
You are more logical than ever. So, what do I want to say about King Charles? King Charles is very fond of Ukraine and President Zelensky. That's one. Donald Trump is very fond of King Charles. That's two. And third, today King Charles will do everything he can to convince President Trump. I'm telling you this. These are insider reports from London. He will do everything in his power to convince former President Donald Trump to stop playing these particular political games with President Zelensky of Ukraine and President Putin of Russia. Yes, with Putin. And in this particular regard, I strongly believe there will be some exceptionally interesting and important behind-the-scenes conversations taking place during President Trump's visit to the UK. And King Charles's potential role in persuading Trump to continue providing aid to Ukraine will be significantly greater, indeed substantially greater than that of Starmer, the Prime Minister. Moreover, it is widely expected that Trump will listen to the counsel of King Charles far more than he would, for example, to Starmer.
Well, yes, because they say Starmer is going through a rough patch. In general, the position of Prime Minister in the UK is like the position of defense against the dark arts teacher in Harry Potter. There's a very high turnover. I don't know what's going on there.
There's only more turnover in Japan.
I don't know, but as far as I can tell, they're writing that Keir Starmer is living out his last days. There's some colossal crisis, massive protests, and Starmer is in a very bad state right now. But which number is he already? I don't even know in terms of succession. Dasha.
Who is in good shape? Show me who is in good shape right now.
I'll tell you, Donny, the King of New York, also known as Trump, I think he's always in good shape. No matter what happens, everything is always fine for him. Dmitry Ilyich, a very interesting statement just came in from a member of parliament. I don't quite understand what reality he's living in, but I'd like us to discuss it together. So elections to the Rada could take place in the coming months. Carl. Member of Parliament Dmitry Cherny, it's now obvious that the war is coming to an end. Some people admit it, others don't. But in fact, we're moving in that direction and certain actions are already starting within the political forces. Member of Parliament, member of the Verkhovna Rada Committee on National Security, Defense and Intelligence, Fedor Venislavsky. So, two deputies have made such statements at the same time. Dmitrievich, what's going on?
I don't know what's going on. I don't see the war moving toward an end. Maybe there are some clairvoyants in the Verkhovna Rada. I repeat, that the war is moving toward an end. I don't see it.
I think we just need to understand that we've entered a period of a very long and protracted war with Russia, for as long as Putin is alive.
Yes, of course.
Dmitry, Peskov and Lavrov have made statements recently. Let's start with Lavrov. What did Lavrov say about
Peskov's Pisochin and Lavrov's Lavrochin?
Let's grill someone today. Finally, Lavrov refuses any negotiation processes. The ceasefire and settlement agreements didn't work, Khan stated. Exchanging territories or trying to tempt, such a word. My God, Putin's idea of restoring trade with the US regarding Ukraine won't work, said the head of Madrusia. He basically just spat in Trump's face in shock. Am I understanding this correctly? Is that a spit?
Look, we need to understand the main thing. It's not Peskov or Lavrov who make such statements. Putin is the one making them through Peskov and Lavrov. There's no such thing as Peskov or Lavrov acting on their own initiative, or Medvedev for that matter. Everything we see is just different shades. Directives, instructions, and in general Putin's messages. Some might be more diplomatic about it. Peskov, for example, is more diplomatic, Lavrov is already more radical, and Medvedev is completely radical. But again, it's not really him, it's all Putin. It's Putin sending messages to the West and Ukraine through these people. Which people? They're devils, not people.
Medvedev, well, essentially, on Wednesday, Lavrov made a statement that Russia is withdrawing from the negotiation process and that the US cannot entice it with economic deals. In other words, Trump's efforts are just a failure.
Of course. They became really brazen after Beijing. It's obvious. After the talks with Xi and that epic walk when the three bogatirs were walking together, so Xi in Mao Zedong's uniform, then Putin and Kim Jong-un. The Russians got cocky after China. It's clear that Xi gave them strong support. So now they make these kinds of statements saying, Trump, who are you anyway? You're nobody here. We have our own policy. You won't knock us off the righteous path. With your business proposals, yeah, we couldn't care less about that either. We'll manage on our own. We need to capture Ukraine.
Dmytro, how will Trump react to this? Or as usual, not at all?
There's a chance that, yeah, he won't react at all. That seems to me the more likely option for now. But there are other possibilities too. After all, Trump too, no matter how he feels about Putin, and it's clear he likes him. Still, there are already harsh voices being raised from within, Republican senators, congressmen, and of course Democrats, saying, how long are we going to mess around with this freak? We need to do something. That's why Trump is irritated that he has to make some kind of decision. But clearly he'll have to, well, what else can he do? There's really nowhere else to go. The longer this drags on, the more negatives there are for Trump. Right now, all the downsides are on Trump's side. So something will definitely happen. There's never been a time when nothing happened at all.
Oh, Dmytro, lately, in terms of geopolitics and our communication with the US, it's exactly that. Nothing is happening. It's like everything with the US has just frozen. Meanwhile, the government building of the Belgorod region was attacked by drones. I wish they would attack the government building in Moscow, not in the Belgorod region. But for now, it's only in the Belgorod region. Dmytro, the floor is yours.
So what's going on there?
Yeah, well, something happened, like the windows there were destroyed. Well, I would have liked to see more serious damage, preferably in the Kremlin. Dmytro, are you seeing that everyone is writing now that in fact Charles has already met with Trump and negotiations are underway? And most likely, among other things, the negotiations will be about Ukraine. But how exactly can Charles put pressure on Trump? Well, I don't know. Maybe bribe him with something, some kind of order or medal, I don't know, a date or something. Trump
is the kind of person, as far as I understand him, who places great importance on relationships with people he is inclined toward. People for whom he feels a certain sentiment. And he does feel a sentiment toward Charles. First of all, in the UK, Trump will be received with unprecedented and extraordinary honors. That is, this is also very important for Trump. And besides, it's not just anyone, it's the King of the United Kingdom. That's important to Trump. There are personal relationships involved. During his previous visit as president, Trump met with Queen Elizabeth during his last term. Elizabeth was a serious woman. Charles is her son. Charles also took part in meetings with Trump back then. There are many connecting links, these bridges that are necessary and extremely important for Ukraine. I'll repeat that Charles has a strong sentiment toward President Zelensky and toward Ukraine. This is very important for us.
Yes, Dmytro, I don't know if it's possible to award an order or some very important title to a foreigner. I mean, in Trump's case, he's an American, not a Brit, but maybe it would be nice if Charles promised him some kind of title. Well, obviously, a title can't actually be given to an American, but something honorary, something above and beyond, something exceptional, like just an honorary infantryman, for example. If Trump puts pressure on Putin, then in addition, maybe a castle or something like that, so that Trump would really feel himself part of the British aristocracy. I think you have to buy him off with something so that Trump will actually do something. In my view, only vanity motivates Trump.
And you know, vanity and the results of vanity are often worth more than money, more than purchases, more than anything else. Well,
of course, because I think that politics itself is an element of vanity, and an enormous amount of money is spent on politics, just enormous, all just to be at the top of power and control everyone. That's also an element of vanity, right?
of course, of course. But let's not forget about finances either. That is, many people go, well, in Ukraine, that's definitely the case. Almost everyone probably goes into politics by investing money so that after entering politics, they can recoup what they invested and increase it. In other words, they invest. It's like a business. For many people in Ukraine, politics is a business. For the majority, it's a business. So I invested 3 hryvnias, and thanks to politics, I made 150. I'll tell you, other countries aren't much different from us in this regard. Look at how much Trump got richer during his presidency.
It's unbelievable, Dmitry. It's just not the same.
And what's more, unlike many politicians in the world, Trump doesn't steal money from his own people. Notice, this is important. Trump is getting rich off all sorts of things, like Bitcoin, all kinds of image-related ventures. His family has become very wealthy. But he doesn't steal money from the United States budget. That's the difference.
Yes, Dmitry. Right now in America, there are 2 top news stories I just read right before our interview. The first is that Jared Kushner has become a billionaire, and there's discussion about how he achieved this, with his biography being examined. Well, because it's clear, take Trump, for example. Now all the American media are scrutinizing his wealth, saying that through his deals and his proximity to Trump, he's become a billionaire, and questioning how exactly that happened. That's the first topic block. And the second is Jeff Bezos buying American Vogue for his beloved wife, Lauren Sanchez. No.
Not beloved, but most beloved.
Yes. So he's buying her a very beloved, most beloved, no matter how much we try to stop you from drinking. In short, the dear woman, he's buying her American Vogue.
Ah, what a truly remarkable woman. What an absolutely incredible woman.
And Anna Wintour, the longtime editor-in-chief of American Vogue, in protest over the controversial purchase of the magazine for Lauren Sanchez, has officially resigned from her influential position. So this purchase, of course, well, for America, it's simply a shocking event. Listen.
Bezos is a wealthy man. He can afford to buy whatever he wants. Well, he wants Vogue. He likes making his wife happy. So what's the problem here? The editor-in-chief left. It's her choice, her right. We're Democrats. We respect that. We're democratically minded people, not Democrats as in the party. I
know that you're a Republican at heart. Everyone knows that by now. We all know it.
In my heart, yes, deep down, I'd tear things up and go wild. I'd tear up whatever I hadn't already destroyed. Anyway, good for Bezos. If he wants to do it, what's the problem? It's not like he's stealing.
No.
He's not taking it from anyone else. He's spending his own money. Well, that's great.
And we have a little news for you to make our viewers happy. A bit of a lighter topic now. So Lauren Sanchez isn't just going to become the head of the yacht. Most likely, she'll become the next Bond girl in the new British James Bond film. Because Jeff Bezos will be financing this movie. So the birth of a new star.
Good for them, I want to say. Good for them. Well, some people have money. They didn't steal it. Well, they want to make movies. So what's the problem? Let them make movies.
Metallic, remind me. So was it a goose or a swan that bit him? When Vitkov was playing golf with Trump, was it a goose or a swan?
Oh, I don't remember. I didn't even know that something bit him. I thought it was Putin who bit him. You're saying a goose or a swan.
No, that's exactly right. You said it perfectly. I think that's more important. Not a goose, not a swan, but Putin. Well, I want to talk to you about Lintigram. So I had a very good attitude toward Lintigram. He has always been a supporter of Ukraine and so on. I thanked him, but now I'm a little surprised by his behavior. So what is Lintigram doing now? Just 3 or 4 days ago, he made a statement that he would initiate consideration of a bill to recognize Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism. I have 2 questions for him. I wanted to discuss this with you, obviously. First, where are his sanctions against Russia? At the very least, let the Senate consider it. It's already autumn, after all. And second, does he even know that unless the Trump administration makes the decision to designate Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism, no decision in Congress will matter to anyone at all?
So, Lindsey Graham is a great friend of Ukraine, and we thank him for taking our tragedy so much to heart and for being a driving force in the United States in supporting Ukraine. That's one. Second, Lindsey Graham made it clear that all my initiatives supported by members of Congress can only be implemented with the support of President Trump. But he did say that. That's only natural. After all, who wants to be in conflict with Trump? No one. And Lindsey Graham doesn't want that either. That's understandable. That's politics. Well, you need a nod from Trump. You need Trump's approval. Yes, that's how it is.
Well, you see, Mityak, it's impotent politics. I just get the sense that until 2026, they won't do anything. When the midterm elections start in the fall of 2026 until the fall of 2026, we'll be meeting with you every week. You'll say, I'm in a good mood, and I'll say the same, but there will be zero, maybe 0.01 progress in America.
All right, let's see.
Mityak, for the finale, I've saved a topic initiated by Donald Trump. Donald Trump likes to talk to the media, as we know. Every evening he communicates with them. And he was asked some questions. He said that he is ready to organize a meeting between Zelensky and Putin. The three of them with him right there as the referee. So I have a question. Considering the statements by Lavrov, Peskov, and so on, do you think this three-way meeting, Trump, Zelensky, and Putin, will be organized in the next decade?
Dasha, I don't know. I don't make predictions that far ahead, or even for the near future. Politics changes so quickly, sometimes it shifts smoothly from one thing to another. You barely have time to notice. I think right now a three-way meeting isn't even being discussed because Putin is against it. And why is he against it? Because, as he says, and he's right, in theory, you need to come to the table with some groundwork. But what groundwork is there? Putin says, Ukraine withdraw from Donbass. Ukraine says, no, we won't withdraw from Donbass. So that's it. There's no groundwork. So what's the point of meeting? Just to pose for the cameras. For Putin, that would be a failure, and he doesn't want to fail.
Yes, dear audience. So next week, it will basically already be the end of September. I expect that we will be destroying Russian oil refineries, that we will be attacking, that Neptune missiles will be flying even more intensively, and that our next stream, as usual with Dmytro Lichny, will start with explosions on Russian territory. Because in order to win, we need to force Russia to end the war, and that is only possible by military means. Dmytro Lich, your traditional closing words at the end of each of our streams.
Dasha, today is your birthday. Sorry that I wasn't able to congratulate you earlier. So now, belatedly, I congratulate you on your birthday. May you be happy. Dasha, may our armed forces bring you joy every day, and me, and our allies, and millions of Ukrainians. So happy birthday. Glory to Ukraine.